Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Women Automotive Network's May virtual event. And we're very excited to be joined by Sarah Gallion from Eclipse Foundation. Sarah, do tell us a little bit about yourself and what we can expect from today's session.
Thank you, Stephanie, and hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be here. Unfortunately, I didn't manage to make it in person this time, but we'll make up for it next year. I'm Sarah Galliano.
What
And I
does
work
that
for the
mean in person
Eclipse
this time for those
Well,
attendees that maybe don't know anything about your background or story or your journey with the Women Automotive Network?
that is a good point. So, me and my team, we have been a constant presence for the last 3 years at the Women Automotive Network Summit in Europe. And this year we are trying this new format with the idea of coming back in person next year.
Amazing. Yeah, it's been wonderful to see your workshop the last couple of years in Stuttgart. And even though you can't join us in Germany, to be able to provide this new platform for others to learn more about the foundation and what you do is super exciting.
Thank
As
you,
always,
Stephanie.
attendees, please write your comments within the chat. The format of this session will be, we're going to give Sarah the opportunity to introduce herself, and then I'm going to go back screen and make sure that Sarah has the floor to herself to teach everything.
Thank you, Stephanie. Do we want to try to see the results of the polls?
Yeah, so there'll be polls running throughout. So if attendees want to click on the section that says polls, the first one is, do you know anything about open source, Eclipse Foundation, and the working group?
Yes, thank you. That really helps us, gauge in what direction we want to go with this presentation and other and other ways that we collaborate with you, because you are not our usual audience, and that's why it's so exciting to be here. And I'm really happy to see that at least 3 people have heard about the Eclipse Foundation. That's great. Okay.
Well, I think we can encourage attendees to get involved in the polls. But for now, I think it will be amazing if you can click present on the slides and start running us through everything.
Yes, so I think I'm already sharing. So someone should pull the screen up. Okay, wonderful. Great. So again, I'm very excited to be here with you today. And just a couple of words about myself. As Stephanie said, I work for the Eclipse Foundation, and I am engaged, and I'm basically driving the Eclipse Software Defined Vehicle working group. This is a working group within the Eclipse Foundation, and we do host and organize platforms for open source projects. But you will hear a lot more about this in just a moment. So first of all, some motivation. I guess that maybe most of you come from the automotive domain, and you have seen that automotive is going through quite some changes and quite some challenges lately. And in fact, there's a lot of different challenges coming at us in automotive. There's the infotainment and user experience, there is electrification, and of course, autonomous driving. And that makes essentially the software complexity and the variant handling explode in complexity. And of course, computing capabilities are always a challenge because you always need to save on those. So that has basically brought forward a transition from hardware to software-centric development, hardware agnostic development, because you want to be able to handle multiple different hardware at the same time, and also a pull on standardize and collaborate together. And this is actually where I'm going to be focusing during this talk. When it comes to software-defined vehicle, there is not a lot of agreement about what that really is. So software-defined vehicle is basically puts itself against hardware-defined vehicle, which is the usual ansatz of development that was followed by the automotive industry so far. But essentially, the idea is that a software-defined vehicle delivers continuous customer experience. So there are always new customer functions. You need to make sure all of the updates are compliant with cybersecurity. You need to install third-party application, and in general, you need to be able to provide continuous updates throughout your life cycle, your vehicle life cycle, not as you just sell your car. And that, together with the complexity we just touched upon earlier, has brought together a number of organizations that are really fiercely competing into coming together and thinking about collaborating. So where can you collaborate and where can you compete? And in fact, there is the need of having a modular architecture with exchangeable building blocks and work on abstraction layer on cloud connectivity. On the other hand, there's also a fierce demand of skilled personnel. And let's be honest about it. So developers do not love automotive. They will work in cloud. They will work on hyperscalers, but not necessarily in automotive. And so this is where the adoption of open source software and in general the transition to software-defined vehicles help a lot. So what I'm posting here is the result of a white paper that you can have a look at. But essentially, there is a shift in mentality where OEMs and tiers need to work together on ecosystem and form partnership in open source. So enter here open source in the automotive industry. The landscape has changed dramatically in the past about 3 to 4 years. And in fact, we have seen a lot of organizations come up with their own open source manifesto. I think the first one was ATAS, followed suit by Bosch, Porsche, Continental, now Aumovio, Mercedes-Benz, CARIAD, and finally also BMW. So they all have their own open source manifesto and a way to engage with open source foundations. I don't know how many of you are familiar or do use and work in open source, but in a nutshell, open source relies on the free software freedom. So you can run your program for any purpose, you can redistribute the copies, you can study how the program works, and of course you can change it as you wish, and not only distribute copies of the unmodified code, but also redistribute the copies of the modified versions. And there is an initiative which is called the OSI, the Open Source Initiative, that defines and always keeps up to date what licenses are considered open source. So this is about the license framework, but from a strategic perspective, how does open source get into your organization? So why and how does it provide customer value? So usually most organizations start by using open source, and that's why I'm very curious to find out in the poll those of you that are using open source. And then slowly but surely, as the number of projects that you engage with grows, slowly but surely you start to contribute to the project. Because say you find a bug or you would like to have one new feature, it doesn't make sense that you develop the feature for yourself, but you bring the feature back, you upstream the feature to the initial project. And so from being a user, you become a contributor. And then finally, as you start working on a number of projects that either you use internally or your organization or are at the backbone of your customer value proposition, you start taking leadership, which means you start your own project, you start your own platform in an open source, open collaboration environment. And in this way, open collaboration truly becomes a leadership proposition for your organization. And this is the standard, let's say, evolution of engaging with open source and open collaboration, because I'm curious to see what you are voting in the polls, but open source already in your code. And in fact, maybe not in automotive, but powers cloud, AI, semiconductor, cybersecurity. 81% of the companies is consuming open source products. I said about being, the user. 80 to 90% of open source make up. So open source makes up 80 to 90% of application. And application is something that your customer is experiencing, he's seeing. But unfortunately, only 44%, and you can see a stark contrast here, of organizations are contributing upstreams to the project, which would be, the second step in what we said earlier. And just again, to set the framework, open source embodies EU values of openness, trust, and collaboration. So why is this relevant? Maybe not all of you are European, but right now Europe is spending really a lot of time and also funds into becoming sovereign, into the European digital sovereignty. And open source is indeed an asset because it reduces dependency, it allows to invest structurally, it operationalizes standards because it defines then open standards and allows for interoperability. And it gives the lead in emerging domains because open source is strictly linked with innovation and speeds up innovation. And of course, it lowers the barrier to entry to SMEs and startup. While usually, if you're talking about software or even, again, hardware, you need to make a big invest because you are able to compete. And having an open source infrastructure truly allows organizations to have access really quickly and be competitive fast. So I touched on communities and why do we come together to work in an open source framework. First of all, there's a few principles that we as a foundation make sure that our working groups and in general collaborations follow. The principle of transparency, as I said, collaboration, open collaboration, meritocracy, and community. And those are the principles that are really at the base of collaborating globally and allowing different perspectives, diverse perspectives as well. And finally, creating shared ecosystems. And we touched earlier upon open source software and free and open source software, the definition of the freedoms. But there are different versions of it. So that has to do with the code, with the actual IP attached to the line of code. And there are different ways to do open source. There's solo, single vendor, and at a foundation. It can be the Eclipse Foundation, but it could be the Apache Foundation, the Linux Foundation, and others. And what is the difference? If you as an individual person, you have a GitLab repository, you publish your code, you attach a license that is recognized by the OSI, that is perfectly fine. So you are showing your code to the community, to anyone that wants to use it. You can create a community of developers that are using mostly your software. You can even have a high quality code that solves complex problems. But then you are completely missing out on everything that has to do with an ecosystem development, a predictable process and guidance. And most importantly, particularly in the framework that we are experiencing now, there is no vendor neutral governance. And that is, of course, the same for solo as well as single vendor open source. And then finally, there is no one that checks on IP and licensing, and this is something that you can do only at a foundation. So if you are thinking about shifting strategically how your organization uses and engages open source, then you need to make sure that what you do is truly vendor neutral and follows a predictable process. And this is where organizations such as the Eclipse Foundation really can support you and take the stage. So what we do is our services enable open source success because, well, first and foremost, we are the leading open source foundation in Europe. We moved to Europe in 2022. And since then, but the foundation existed already for several years. But what we do is essentially we provide governance and stewardship we make sure that everything we do is fully vendor neutral and is developed in a sustainable manner. We check on IP management and licensing. So all of the code that we host, we make sure that it is it has a correct license. And we bring community together, and we make sure that we build diverse communities and we drive contribution of our members. We also advertise what we do by setting up branding, marketing programs, as well as organizing events. We have a reliable IT service and infrastructure, and we also have a security team making sure that that the code that we host is indeed secure. And in fact, we are the only European organization that has, through the Glasswing project, access to Mythos, to Cloud Mythos. And we are, in fact, surveilling and making sure that we are letting our projects know whenever there are vulnerabilities. So security is a very important topic. And then fundraising and creating ecosystems. So through working group and in general industrial organizations, we raise funds and we recruit new members, and we make sure that the whole infrastructure stays in place. More numbers about the Eclipse Foundation. We have more than 420 projects, more than 300 members, 50 plus countries represented. This is always quite impressive. And we also do host industry collaboration. And the SDV working group is indeed an industry collaboration. And why do we do that? Because we want to make sure we set in place an ecosystem, because open source code is not enough. It is not if it is not part of a platform and an ecosystem. We ensure that the collaboration through our members follows the rule of our governance. It is neutral, predictable, and sustainable. And we also make sure that the contribution is based on the correct transfer of IP rights and also has future influence. So I think I set the basis to come finally full circle and let you know what the software-defined vehicle working group is. So as I said, the automotive software is going through quite a lot of changes, and there is always more need to develop code that gives value. So develop faster, develop in a sustainable manner, share the cost, and share the risk. And in fact, there is a third option between the make or buy option, which has been the paradigm for the last 50 years or so. There is a third option, which is integrate and collaborate. So enters the SDV working group, which was established in 2022. We follow a code-first approach, and our projects really endeavor to build the industry's first open source software stack and associated tool chains and tooling capabilities to develop quickly the new generation of automotive software. And we have three main pillars to our projects. We have the SDV Ops, essentially cloud solutions, dev, toolchains and workflow, everything that enables the projects to develop code. And then we have finally SDV Edge, which is in-vehicle software stack. We have a really wide variety of members. They span from tiers, tier ones such as Bosch, Bosch ATAS, Continental, now Aumovio, through OEMs such as BMW, Mercedes, Cariad. They are all our members. But we also rely on hyperscalers such as Microsoft, and essentially anyone else in the full pyramidal structure of automotive. We have, I think, more than 50 members. They are organized in different categories depending on the level of influence that they want to have within the working group. And we've been quite successful so far, because in just a few years, we were able to gather a critical mass of what we call building blocks. And every building block is one project, is one open source project, with a defined team and with a defined roadmap and evolution. And we are able to visualize our project on a very complex landscape, spanning from operating systems such as Eclipse through orchestrators such as Ankyos, Bluechy, and then also all the way to middleware platforms such as Eclipse S-CORE. We have a demonstrator that we can easily showcase and change one block with the other. And the way we achieve this community and really this code first mantra and this critical mass of project is via creating a community. And in fact, we do believe that being the home both of developers and management truly makes a difference. In fact, our community gets together, by the way, pretty much all over the world. We just had this week a meetup in India. We're going to have a meetup in the US in November. And we were at CES at the very beginning of the year. And so we truly are a global community. And we have opportunities for both the developers and the managers, as I said, to get together mostly in person. We organize community days. We organize the Automotive Open Source Summit, which is coming up at the end of June. And I would love to see you there. We organize hackathons and also local meetups to basically engage with the local community. And I mentioned earlier, I don't want to talk, I would talk, but I don't have the time, unfortunately, to talk about our most successful projects. But I want to highlight the Eclipse Safe Open Vehicle core, because this is a particular project because it endeavors to provide a shared safety-aligned middleware platform for high-performance ECUs. And if you've ever engaged with open source, there's always the notion that it's difficult to build safe and certifiable open source software. But this is actually not the case. So we are now tackling the challenge not only of writing code, not only the technical challenge of setting a middleware in place, but also of doing it in a collaborative manner in a way that is certifiable down the line. So S-CORE is truly the first middleware project that is end-to-end from the operating system all the way to applications that wants to be certified and certifiable against the ISO 26262. And the project has a very, very quick timeline and should release its first version by the end of this year. So we are very excited to see how this is going to be progressing. And I want to point out that this is not a side project. This is a project that is supported by the automotive industry. And in fact, we have reached a wonderful milestone, which is the automotive industry has signed a memorandum of understanding where they pledge that they will develop open source software in the middleware domain, so below what constitutes value to this organization, and they will develop it at the Eclipse Foundation under the umbrella of the S-CORE project. We have, as I said, 32 signatories of the Memorandum of Understanding, and according to the VDA, that will bring 30% faster development and 40% reduced risk, because you obviously are spreading the risk of developing a certain piece of code between more than one organization. So we're very proud of that achievement. And I said at the beginning, the Eclipse Foundation is not only about Eclipse SDV working group. We do have a full-blown ecosystem that endeavors to create an autonomous, trustable, and scalable technology stack for Europe. We work on processes. We have the functional, safety, and trustable software, which is a process that tells project and how to calculate the risk in their software. So we have a framework to interpret the risk and calculate it and see its evolution. We have the Open Hardware Foundation that endeavors to, that works with RISC-V cores and toolchain. We have embedded real-time operating systems such as ThreadX, which is, by the way, ISO 26262 safety certified. We have Oniro. We have a very well-developed set of tools. We have, of course, the Eclipse IDE, which has evolved in Theia AI. We have OpenVSX, and we have the whole cloud dev tools. And then we have what we call application building blocks. Eclipse SDV is one of those building blocks, although it's a very big one. And but we also have the IoT working group, the Sparkplug working group as well. And we support all of this by looking into defining contracts for sharing data, such as the data space program. And we don't forget to support within AI enablement. We have the Edge Native, we have the IGE project, and we have the Elmos project. So the Eclipse Foundation is really offering a full open source stack, basically, to enable application, whether in the automotive or in the IoT domain. And this is what we have achieved so far, and that's where I'm really excited about, because we have managed in a very conservative organization and industry as the automotive industry. We have managed to be the bridge between two worlds, because the industry wants to reduce complexity, to standardize below the value line in the form of having building blocks. They want to have software that is sustainable and maintainable. They want to be able to reuse this software, and of course, they want to have software which is certifiable against the ISO of the 26262 in this case of automotive. But on the other hand, as Eclipse, we have always worked in the open source world, which plays with different rules. It's non-consensus driven. It doesn't have a long-term planning and milestone set up. It doesn't follow a mandatory process. It has multiple competing building blocks, and it evolves in a very highly fragmented way. And it is based on an heterogeneous community. So, this is what we have been able to do by setting in place a really strong governance, and by creating a community that believes in what we do, with the support of management. And last but not least, we are part of a European ecosystem, because Europe is more and more, as I said at the beginning, more and more engaged with making sure that it is digitally sovereign. And we are part of European Union initiatives and projects, such as ECAVA, the European Connected Autonomous Vehicle Alliance. We are part of that, and in general, we are part of a number of EU-funded projects. Yeah, so I hope I've steered your interest, and I would love to ask you to follow us and to get involved with the working group by means of mailing list. We have a Slack workspace. We have a very full of meeting community calendar. You can check it out online. I'll post you a link. And if you want to stay up to date, you can always check our SDV newsletter. And with that, I would like to thank you all for your attention, and I guess I'm open to questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sarah. Audience are obviously been a little shy today. Maybe they're enjoying the sunshine. But I have a couple of questions for you. So you work with 50 companies already across the entire ecosystem, which is amazing. For those in the audience, or for those that are thinking about the collaboration and maybe the competitive advantage, what's a successful approach to initiating a partnership with you?
I think if that's a question for me, then I think the most important step to take is the willingness of adopt a number of projects. So the willingness of really chipping in code and developers' time. So this is the first and foremost first step. And then secondly, looking into taking up the leadership. As I as I shared at the very beginning, usually organizations start as user, become contributors, and then finally take up a leadership role. But realistically, when they start engaging with us, we are very happy if they are contributors and if they want to use the software. So that is always the first step.
Okay. And I guess, do you see this open source not just becoming a differentiator, but almost like a baseline necessity for people in the industry?
Yes, it is a commodity. So no one's making money anymore in the automotive domain for a middleware, right?
Yeah.
So no one, your customer don't care what communication protocol you have in their car. They care about this functionality and this other ADAS function or particular experience, but they don't care of what is beneath this layer. So why spending money and time developing everything from scratch?
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think you're right. There's definitely a conflict at the minute between that brand loyalty, as well as obviously that collaboration and partnerships and the whole ecosystem merging together. Well, thank you so much. I'm really surprised that there are no questions at all. Audience, please, are there any last questions that Sarah can answer for you? Please do put them in the chat. It's on the right-hand side there.
I think they all know about that.
Perfect.
If they are
Okay.
members,
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. There is a speed networking session on the left-hand side that you're welcome to use. And this, for those of you that haven't joined before, is a one-on-one matching service where you're randomly matched with other participants for video calls. You can kind of extend the time if it's a good match and skip if it's not quite right for you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for your time. For everyone else in the community, we look forward to either welcoming you in Detroit, June 2nd, Europe maybe this October, which Sarah's hosted the workshop at the last couple of years. And in between that, we're pleased to announce lots of local meetups in Munich, Frankfurt, and Stuttgart. So